Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback who is 45 years old, but is often referred to as ageless, has broken nearly every NFL record he can. Brady has not been able to break one record, which is held by an ageless predecessor named George Blanda. Blanda was a veteran quarterback and kicker who was forced to retire after his team let him go. What do we know about his predecessor? How do they differ? Let's find out. To begin, let's look at an overview of the subject. Brady has recently been likened to Blanda because the 7-time Super Bowl winner has run out of things to do. The exception is the NFL's longevity record, which Blanda, who died at 83 in 2010, evidently took great delight in. He wasn't a horrible person. He just didn't take idiots lightly, says Frank Cooney, a veteran sports writer who covered Blanda and the Raiders for the San Francisco Examiner. Cooney was one of the reporters whom Blanda spoke after he was fired. There were certain restrictions. The media had to assist him in loading his car first. There would be no press conference and there would be no farewell tour. Blanda's responses were usually simply 2 or 3 words long. He had his more lovable moments, but they weren't frequent, Cooney adds. We were 25 years and a worldview away, but I had a lot of regard for his tenacity and the fact that there was no circumstance in a football game that rattled him. Ron Borges, then a 23-year-old on the Raiders beat for the Sacramento Union, says today, he never admitted to knowing what pressure was. He was a tough person who could be irascible at times, but he was also dependable, honest, and forthright. Moving on, how is Brady's retirement different from Blanda's? Brady declared his retirement in February, only to retract it 40 days later. That was nothing compared to Blanda, who resigned from football for the first time 17 years before the Raiders permanently removed him from the league. In 1958, while he was still in his early 30s, the Chicago Bears, his first NFL team, informed him he was too old. So, after a 1-year retirement, the Houston Oilers of the embryonic AFL hired Blanda in 1960, and he led them to 2 AFL championships. However, he was liberated in 1967. Once again, I'm too old. He was signed by the Raiders and played through the 1969 season before being released during the 1970 exhibition season. Again, I'm too old. Blanda was later re-signed by the Raiders for the 1970 regular season, mostly to serve as their kicker, but he went on to become an American legend. At a period in his life when he should be sitting in the stands with a thermos of hot chicken soup, late comedy writer Irma Bombeck wrote, he is spurring the Oakland Raiders to some incredible triumphs. After that, what do we know about the hair differences between Blanda and Brady? Brady has kept his career going by following a strict diet and training regimen, and he looks great for his age. Blanda looked his age, with matted, graying hair and thick sideburns, as if he'd used his face for place-kicking practice with his square-toed shoe. He was 48, but in my mind he was 70, Cooney explains. He did, however, strike a romantic figure. Blanda would be an excellent national spokesperson for Grecian Formula, a men's hair coloring product. In the TV spots, he'd remark, someone you know may be using the Grecian Formula, and you may not even realize it. Next, let's look at how Brady and Blanda compare when stepping in for the injured in their teams. Brady has been the center of attention since he took over for the injured Drew Bledsoe early in his second pro season and won the first of his 7 Super Bowls a few months later. On the other hand, Blanda did not become a popular figure in American culture until he was 43. He'd had a very good 17 years for the Bears and Oilers. He was the 1961 AFL MVP, but a month into the 1970 season, after starter Darryl LaMonica was sidelined with back spasms in a game against Pittsburgh, he emerged as a man for the Middle Ages, as Dave Distel of the Los Angeles Times put it. Blanda had been on the team primarily to kick, so he'd only thrown 11 touchdown passes in his first 3 seasons in Oakland. However, in the Raiders' 31-14 win on October 25th, he threw 3 touchdown passes while adding 2 extra points and 3 field goals. Then things got crazy. LaMonica returned to quarterback a week later, but Blanda added 2 extra points, including a 48-yard field goal in the final seconds that barely cleared the outstretched hand of 6'10" Kansas City tight end Morris Stroud. A week later, LaMonica strained his shoulder against the Cleveland Browns in the 4th quarter, so Blanda drove the Raiders 69 yards to tie the game with 1 minute and 34 seconds remaining. The following week at Denver, Blanda came in late and drove the Raiders 80 yards for the game-winning touchdown. Moving on, what do we know about Blanda's NFL history as a kicker? Blanda threw only 55 passes that season, and the Raiders were defeated in the AFC Championship game by the Baltimore Ravens. Nonetheless, he was named the Associated Press Male Athlete of the Year and received the Burt Bell Award as the NFL's most valuable player, chosen by the Maxwell Football Club. This George Blanda is as good as his father, who used to play for Houston, joked Chiefs owner Lamar Hunt, comparing the same quarterback at 2 different points in his career. Blanda would play 5 more seasons, mostly as a kicker, though he did catch a pass against the Chiefs in the final regular season game in 1975. He kicked an extra point and a field goal in the AFC Championship game, but the Raiders were defeated by the Pittsburgh Steelers 16-10. He had no intention of playing his final game. In the 1976 draft, the Raiders selected Boston College kicker Fred Steinfort as a backup in case the rookie failed. "This is the 3rd time a team has declared me too old to play. Only this time they may be correct," Blanda said after being released. Blanda wondered who else would want a 48-year-old kicker on a $90,000 contract. As it turned out, no one. Madden knew the players were completely confident in Blanda's ability to deliver, says Borges. So if he outperformed the Raiders' new young kicker, the pressure would be on to keep him. He'd proven himself in the clutch numerous times with the Raiders. Who was this kid who was replacing him? Following that, more on Blanda's life as a kicker and how long Brady has to get to him. The Raiders won the Super Bowl that year, but Steinfort was injured in the middle of the game and was replaced by Errol Mann. Steinfort only spent 1 season in Oakland. The Raiders invited Blanda to the AFC Championship game, but it was Christmas, and he wanted to spend time with his family. Blanda set 7 NFL records, including the most points 2002 during his career. With 2,673 points, Adam Vinatieri now holds the record. Blanda was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility in 1981. Brady still has 3 years before catching Blanda. Brady appears to be taking things 1 year at a time, but perhaps he will do the right thing and retire before the 109th day of his 49th year, just so another Ironman standard can be maintained. Finally, a general recap of George Blanda's best moments. In the 1970s, 48-year-old George Blanda was still an important player in the NFL, a sport dominated by young men. He played his final game as an Oakland Ranger at Pittsburgh's Three Rivers Stadium on January 4th, 1976 in the AFC Championship game. Blanda kicked a 41-yard field goal and added an extra point as the Raiders fell 16-10 to the eventual Super Bowl champion Steelers. George Blanda, 43, was cut by the Raiders in preseason training camp in September 1970, his career seemingly over. On the other hand, Blanda bounced back to make his 21st professional season one of the most dramatic comebacks in sports history. Beginning with the Raiders game against Pittsburgh on October 25th, Blanda put together 5 straight clutch performances. Blanda threw 2 touchdowns to relieve an injured Darryl LaMonica against the Steelers that day. 1 week later, he salvaged a 17-17 tie with the Kansas City Chiefs with a 48-yard field goal with 3 seconds remaining. Blanda came off the bench to throw a pass to tie the Cleveland Browns with 1:34 remaining, then kicked a 53-yard field goal as time expired for the 23-20 win. Blanda replaced LaMonica in the 4th quarter of the team's next game, and he connected with Fred Biletnikoff on a touchdown pass with 2:28 left in the game to help the team defeat the Denver Broncos 24-19. He kept the Raiders in the game until he was intercepted twice in the 4th quarter. He became the oldest quarterback to play in a championship game at 43. Well, that marks the end of our video for today. We hope you enjoyed it. On your way out, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.